Holidays. Thank you so much for joining me for our speech boot camp. We're going to learn how to write goals that are game changers for the children, that are not only highly effective goals, that are really going to create great change and really move that needle. Even more importantly, these goals will really flesh out the how. So these goals are going to let you know that this is how we're going to get this ambitious goal. It tells the teachers, it tells the parents, or any other member of the child's team how we're going to aim higher and how we're going to get there. So I am so excited that you're here today. My name is Kelly Vess. If you don't already know me, I am both a speech pathologist in the schools and a researcher. I am author of the book Speech Sound Disorders, Comprehensive Evaluation and Treatment. And I have a podcast as well and anything else related to speech pathology. So this is not work for me. This is a passion. And I'm so honored to be in your company because it's obviously a passion for you as well, because we're meeting at 9 a.m. on a day in which many of us are on vacation. So thank you so much. I'm going to make the next 45 minutes totally worth it. First, I'm going to have a cup of coffee. A cup of coffee, a sip of coffee. So let's dive into it. The first thing that we're going to look at is why we're here. Now, this is really important. What I'm seeing right now is a lot of goals that looks like they were written 20 or 40 years ago even. They're written from a very simple bottom up level. And when we look at that, the problem is the goals are simply too easy. So what that means is what speech language pathologists are often doing is they're looking at how a child performs on a test independently, and then they're looking at what is the next small step, and that's going to be the goal. And what's the next small step after that? And what's the next small step after that? Well, I'm going to encourage you to think so differently about that. I'm going to encourage you to think not what is it that the child can do independently. That is of little interest when it comes to goals. What we want to know is what could the child do if we give them every single tool in our toolbox. So if you know me, this toolbox comes out a lot because that's what makes you a speech pathologist. If you don't have a toolbox, you're just your average Jill or Joe off the street. You're not, if a child says tat for cat, you would say cat, and we'd be done. But we know that doesn't work. For the child to say cat, you need a box full of tools, which is what you have as a speech pathologist. So I don't care that the child's saying tat for cat. I care about what can the child do when you bring out a huge box of tools and empty out all of your cues. So that's why in my book, if you have my book, you're going to see I have a dynamic speech assessment in which you give the child a maximum level of cueing at the evaluation. It's inside this book here. And at that point, you see, what is this child capable of? And that's going to be our starting point when I give them every single tool that I've got, a maximum level of cueing. So that's the problem when we went back in graduate school, how many years back, and even graduate schools today still continue to propose this, is let's start at the next level as a goal, a next level of what the child's independently able to do, which is just really too small. So small treatment targets are going to produce small gains. We need to think bigger. And we're going to be able to think bigger because we have our toolbox. That's why we're going to take this child and we're going to raise them to a much higher level because we have these scaffolds. So another problem with goals today is that the research indicates that the greater the gains, the higher the targets, but many people are still using the developmental approach. So for instance, if the child is able to produce P, B, and M, they're going to say, well, let's go to T, D, and N as our next step. Now, the problem with that approach is that speech develops like a waterfall. And when you work on higher level, more complex sounds, the earlier sounds are going to naturally develop. So if I'm working on, okay, they know P, B, and M, now let's go for T, D, and N, I'm only getting T, D, and N. There's no geyser impact. And because you worked on T, D, and N, you're going to get K and G and F and V and S and Z and sh and ja. No, they're up here. There's no geyser unless you're going to Yellowstone. So we need the waterfall effect. So the waterfall effect is going to happen when we have goals that are higher, and then we're going to have better use of our little limited time. Our time is so limited. We cannot waste our time on the small stuff. Don't sweat the small stuff. The T, D, and N will naturally develop when you're working on S blends. They will be first. They will come in first. We're going to talk about that later. So when we're looking at our practice today, it doesn't match the research. So what the research is showing today is that the higher the goals, the more multimodal cues that you're using, the better the outcomes. But what I'm seeing is a lot of goals that are very low and there aren't multimodal cues written into them. So they're 0 for 2. Multimodal cueing is something the research shows is effective with diverse populations of children. Children with cognitive impairment benefit from multimodal cueing. Children with childhood apraxia speech, children with autism, children with articulation impairment, children with phonological processes. So what am I saying? Multimodal cueing is a best practice, period. Why are we not seeing it in the goals? If those are not in your goals are not evidence-based. Also, why are the goals written so low? Why are they taking this old developmental approach when the research is constantly developing and there's more and more every day that's showing that the more complex the target, the greater the gains. Challenge equals change. So that research is just every year, more and more and more and more. And people say, well, there's research from 20 years ago that said that the developmental approach is more effective. And it's like, oh, no, there isn't. There was a study over 20 years ago that found that P develops before R. If you work on P, you're going to get it before you're going to work on R. If you work on R, that's not about intervention. That's about how speech innately develops all over the world, no matter where you are or no matter what approach you're doing. And we're going to talk about that later. So what that is called false causation, where someone says, if you work on P with a child and if you work on R with the other child, the child's going to get P faster. And that has nothing to do with the intervention approach and everything to do with how we develop speech. And then someone said, hence that's research against the complexity approach. No, that's research to show that earlier sounds develop before later ones. Okay, so we need to put the research into practice. And what we have today is that we have what we have is a 17-year gap. So Holly Storkel and her colleagues just did a presentation at ASHA, and they said, we're looking at about 17 years between what the research finds and what speech pathologists are doing in their practice. And this is what I'm seeing in the goals. That's what a 17-year gap looks like. So that's why I'm so passionate about this, because when you change the goals, you change the intervention, you change the child's life, you change how the team looks at the child. And the team stops looking at the child as, can you or can't you? And instead they start saying, how can you do this? That's what we're doing here. We are changing lives, and it's going to start with the goals. So we need to get the research and the practice. And today, what we're going to do is we're going to get today's research. We don't need to wait no 17 more years. Today's research, and we're going to put it into practice today. And that's why I'm so happy you're here. That's how we change lives. So what are we going to do? We are going to aim higher. Now that's how we're going to start. We're going to start higher. No more baby steps. We're going to start high because we're going to give them the scaffolds. We're going to use a most to least hierarchy of prompting. So we're not going to say, what can you do if I give you a verbal model? Say tat. Oh, they said tat for cat. Negative. Say tat. They said tat for cat. Negative. That's a minimal level of prompting. That's what Joe or Jill Schmo can do off the street. You're not earning your bucks that way. We're going to give them, once again, here's my toolbox, every single prompt in your toolbox. This is why I'm trained in every single approach out there. Every approach. Okay, your girl here, and you probably are too, is trained in prompt, is trained in easy does it hypoxia, Kaufman. Every single approach, lively letters, it's all in there. What I've created myself. Because this is what differentiates you. This is what creates change when the natural environment doesn't work. Okay, so we're going to give them, to start, our most prompts. Then we can pull away the prompts. What else are we going to do? We're going to use multimodal cueing. Okay, what is multimodal cueing? Well, let's talk about all of the ways of cueing. We can cue auditorily. We can cue tactile through touch. Now, I prefer to have children touch themselves, and I model. Tactile is very powerful, but because I want them to become their own teacher, I prefer that they touch themselves. If they're doing the B, they're touching themselves. We're going to use visuals. So we are going to use our bodies and show them with our bodies in space what the sounds look like to make it very salient. We're going to use gestural, which is we're going to show them how the tongue and the mouth is moving in the body. This is very natural that we all do in all of our gestures that we use every day. Look at what I'm doing with your tongue. Do this. Come here. Your tongue is doing the same thing as the hand is doing. Hello, hello. Your tongue is doing the same thing as your hand is doing. Stop. Your tongue is doing the same thing as your hand is doing. So why are we doing that? Because it works. It helps speech. The way your body and your mouth are connected. I always find it interesting. I tell people when I have longer workshops to raise your hand in here. Go ahead, raise your arms in the air and then say, I'm mad. Try to be mad. Try to make an angry voice. Try to make an angry face. You can't because your body is connected to your mouth. So are we going to use gestural cues with the body? Some people will call it temporal cues. I just like to use gestural because it's parent friendly. Yeah. Because there's something called entrainment. And what your body is doing, your mouth is going to do. So what else are we going to do? Because we're putting research into practice today. We're not going to wait 17 years. We're going to select multifaceted goals that treat multiple domains. No more just working on the mouth. Because we know that children with speech sound disorders, and we're going to talk about it in a minute, can impact every single area of the child's life. And why are we doing all this best practice, best practice, best practice, best practice? Because you only have 30 to 45 minutes a week to create change. So you have to be lean and mean when it comes to what you do with those 45 minutes. You've got to cut the fat. If there's any part of your therapy that is not creating massive change, you got to get rid of it. It's kind of like if you and I were to have breakfast right now and I gave you $50 and I'm like, go get us breakfast. You might bring back the mimosas, the organic fruit. You're going to bring back a spread for me. If I gave you $5, what are you going to bring back? You're going to bring back the old-fashioned oats. That's how we have to think about therapy. You only got $5. You can't be wasting your therapy time on stuff that is just ineffective. And instead, use it wisely. You don't got $50. You got $5. So that's what we're going to talk about. With those $5, we're going to do everything right. And when we do everything right, there's this cumulative effect. And what happens is the needle moves and you're changing these children's lives in only 30 to 45 minutes a week. It's kind of like Olympic trainers, like today's Olympians. What do? They look at the whole person. They look at food. They look at exercise. They look at diet. They look at counseling. They look at sleep. They look at every single aspect of the athlete because they want to create change. And they can't just do that by working on a muscle or by working on a certain skill. You have to treat the whole person. Okay. This is fun. Thank you so much for joining me. This is so much fun to talk about because we have some time to sit during vacation and we have some time to reflect on our practice. And when I reflect on my practice, that's when I make the greatest gains. When I take in all the information I received every day from 40 different preschoolers, and you're exhausted and you just think about it and you just take notes. That's when you're going to become better, isn't that reflection period? So I'm glad we're together reflecting right now. So what is it? There's no such thing as just speech. So Kelly Farquharson, she wrote an article as no such thing as just artic. And why is that? Because when you have a child with speech sound disorders, the educational eligibility articulation impairment, they're at greater risk. And a lot of this research came from Megan Overby, and how teachers rated children who just had speech sound disorders for academic challenges, for attentional deficits, for behavior difficulties, for executive function, for language, literacy, motor skills, socialization. So we can't pretend that it's just speech when really it's so much more. You're treating a whole child. So our goals and our intervention need to reflect that. We're not going anywhere if we're going to pretend that we're treating just speech, a unicorn, in which it's just articulation and there's no other impact for the child's life. So let's see what we have here. Now, how does this work? Today, we're just talking about speech sound disorders, but I'm not just treating speech when I treat speech sound disorders. And that's in my treatment target. That's in my goal. We're not even talking about the activities. When we get into the activities, I'm going to talk about task-oriented movement activities and how that's what I use with every single child on my caseload because I'm not treating a mouth. But we're talking about just the goal. And just the goal that you write, you can treat the whole child. So this is, you might have, if you have my book, you've seen in the book, there are downloads, treatment targets ready to use. I also have, of course, in my CIS membership, I have more treatment target cards, and there's going to be 12 new ones that are coming in January and February of 2023 for my CIS members. But look at this. This is what it looks like. This is the treatment target. This is not your mama's therapy. Okay, your mama's therapy was here is 20 different S blends, and you say each 10 times, and you go ahead and you use a bingo dabber, or you use a little check mark, or a little, I don't know, chipper chap. I have no idea. That's not what we're doing here. Okay. So what you're seeing here is in terms of speech, what does it look like? I've got scrape, I've got spray, I've got drop, I've got angry. What do I have in that? I've got 4 very different R's. It's kind of like you work a muscle from different angles to tone that muscle. I've got 4 different R's. If you see it in the mirror, it's going to be like scrape, all retracted. Then you're going to say spray, all protruded. Spray. Then you're going to see drop. Then you're going to see some drop, which is both protraction and retrusion. And then you're going to see angry, which is a big old smile. Angry. So those are 4 very different R's. We know there's over 32 variations of R. And if we're going to attack R, we can't just attack it in a single way. They have very different phonetic contexts. So we have complex speech targets because the higher you aim, the higher the gains. We have attention. This child has to say 4 sentences. Attention is huge. So when I work on this with children with autism, we're just going one word at a time. Maybe they're speaking at the 1 word level, and we're just stringing that on like popcorn. The secret is this. Don't let more than 2 to 3 seconds elapse between the words. Because when you do that, you get out of a continuous motor movement. Speech is not a discrete motor movement where we say, can't, I. It's continuous. So for it to be continuous, you keep it going. Can I even keep the voice going, even as if it's like you're working with a child who stutters. Can I don't let more than 2 to 3 seconds elapse between the words. String it on like popcorn. What's happening when you do that? Attention. So Amazon and social media and Google, they're onto something with attention. Attention is so valuable, and especially for children with autism or children with ADHD. When neuroplasticity is at a high level, what I find is when I work on this paragraph with the children with autism, attention improves. And when attention improves, every aspect of that child's life is going to improve. It's just a goal. It's just a treatment target. And I'm going to show you in a moment how this goal is written. But it's not just treating a sound, we're treating a child. Executive function. So do you see these words? First, next, then, because. These are words that children with executive function have a lot of difficulty with. And these are words that are the golden apple that's going to help them so much. And why is this going to help them so much? It's because self-directed speech. So interventions that give children these words help them organize their thoughts, because language is a container of thoughts. And when children have these words automatic, they're better able to organize their language. They're better able to tell stories. They're better able to get through multiple steps, to start it, to finish it, to go to the next step and not go off. This is powerful stuff here. Language. So we're using tier 2 vocabulary. You know what tier 2 vocabulary is? Those are those words that are million-dollar words that are going to be used in every area of the child's academic curriculum. First, next, then, because. Let's make it automatic when we're treating a speech sound disorder. What else do we have? Literacy. Literacy, we're going to talk about more about this in the next boot camps, because it is perhaps, I think, according to the research today, what we know today, the most powerful way you can improve language comprehension and language expression. Literacy. So that's going to come up in our next boot camp, our language boot camp. You better believe we're going to be talking about storytelling. What about motor coordination? And this is huge. So a lot of the children we work with that have a speech sound disorder also have a motor disorder in the body. And they have difficulty with 2 areas: planning, programming, and executing. Actually, 3 areas. So planning where the tongue is going to go in space. And a lot of them, they can speak well at the single word level, but then when you put it into the sentence or paragraph level, it becomes jargon. So what we're doing is improving their planning ability to know, where is my tongue going to go? Their programming ability to say, what muscles I'm going to have to use together to make it happen, and their execution in which it actually happens. And we're doing that because we're having the child say a whole paragraph. Challenge creates change. If we want to improve motor coordination, have them do more challenging motor coordination acts. And by the way, the research in the area of physical therapy has shown, just as we're finding in speech sound disorders, that the more complex the treatment target, the greater the gains. So work higher gains when it comes to motor. It's no surprise, but the research is there. So let's look at what a goal would look at. Like, okay, so this is so important. And when I finally decided to change my goals to really describe how we're going to get to this complex target, it changed immeasurably the team and the parents' buy-in. So let me explain. It's one thing to say, I'd like your child to say SKR, because it's the hardest blend in the English language, and because it's like running a marathon in speech therapy. And when I work on SKR in speech therapy, your child's going to be able to do a 5K like that, or a 10K, or a half marathon, because we're working on the marathon in speech therapy. Now, that's how I used to explain things. And parents are like, oh, okay, I get it. But I wanted to use this time to explain how so that parents can more actively be partners in the intervention, so that teachers can more actively be partners in the intervention, and stop focusing on, can the child do it independently or can the child not do it independently? So I want to stop that black and white thinking. He can't do that. He can do that. Instead, ask how. And I want the parents thinking how. And I want a change of mindset with teachers and other members of the team thinking how. So I totally rewrote these goals. And when I did, it had a great benefit to the team and the parent buy-in so that they could more actively be a member of the team. So this is a big game changer. So when I looked at this, let's say we're going to work on my favorite blend of all, SKR, which is Mirror, Mirror on the Wall, the most powerful of them all. And we've done the research and we found if you're going to choose blends, S blends are more powerful than any other type of target when it comes to improving non-targeted sounds. So these are the power players. Go for S blends if you have a choice between F blends or K blends or TH blends or S blends. Go for the S blends. They are the most powerful. You're going to get the best results. We did the research for you. You're welcome. Now, let's look at the goal. So when we look at the annual goal, we have that this child currently stops the airflow from fricatives. So instead of S, instead of the word sun, they're saying ton. They're currently saying K, G, and ing in the front of their mouth. So instead of cat, they're saying tat. They're also gliding the L and R. So instead of L and R, they're saying W. So they're saying wake for rake. So how are we going to get 3 for the price of 1? Remember, we only have $5. And there's something called Parkinson's principle, which means if you're given $5 and you're saying, go buy lunch, you're going to spend that money more wisely. So I want you to remember you have $5 to spend. So don't waste it. Don't you dare waste it for breakfast. Okay, what are we going to do here? We are going to say by January 2024, because we're going to write this goal in January. I'm going to write this goal in January. This child will be able to produce SKR in the context of a complex treatment target paragraph, provided a minimal level of prompting. So maybe, for instance, it's visual or imagery. Maybe with that R sound, it needs a little reminder that I jump in and give them a little visual. Maybe I need to say, don't forget the angry dog teeth. What are you going to remember? Angry dog teeth. Okay, I saw the angry dog teeth with 80% accuracy. Now, I'm working with preschoolers. Maybe you're working with school-age children. I don't want the child, I don't expect a child that at 7 years of age has not mastered a preschooler to be able to say SKR. And I explain it to the parents. I don't expect that your child a year from now can do SKR. And your child who's a 4-year-old will be able to do something that a 7-year-old could do. I do, however, want to use SKR because the higher I aim, the higher the gains. And this is the highest I can aim. So I'm going to still continue to give them cues so that they're able to do it. So your scaffolds are still going to be there. You're giving them a minimal level of prompting. You're not giving them everything, but you've got something there so that they're able to do it correctly. And it's important that they're able to do it correctly because practice makes perfect. Practice also makes imperfect. So that is the annual goal, is that with some visual, maybe a little imagery, which I say, don't forget your angry dog teeth, or I need to hear the snake sound, or where was the tongue? The back of your mouth. There's a little bit of a reminder so that they're able to do it correctly. And that is a wonderful place to be. So what is going to be our first 3-month goal? Our first 3-month goal, progress report period, is that the child is able to, once again, once again, we want the child to be able to produce SKR, but this time it's with a maximal level of prompting. So within 3 months of working with this child, the child's going to be able to do, as you see, slowed speech, snake sound, self-tactile, maybe the child's gone, ka. Then we have the visual, the gesture, for the scrape, a little visual, And with the imagery. I heard the snake sound, the snake sound, the snake sound. I heard the snake sound. I heard a loud "sss." So we are going to take this and give them every possible cue we have in the box. Everything. We're going to give them everything so that they're 80% accurate. Because if they're below 80%, you risk frustration and you risk habituation of the error. If they're above 80%, it's just too easy. I got to pull away some of my scaffolds. I'm not challenging you. We've got to be moment to moment dancing. Sometimes children just have off days where they're just like, wait, and it's like, whoa, you're tired today. Okay, I need to go back to the maximum level of prompting, and we're going to go 0 miles an hour today. So that's what we're going to do. And we're going to go really slowly. And you know what I'll say? I need to hear all the letters. We're going to say all the letters correctly. We're just going to go so slowly. We'll just take a step back. Because therapy is always this dance, back and forth interaction. And what you care about is, are you 80% accurate? And some days I'm going to have to carry you. And some days you're going to be on your own. But I'm always, every minute of therapy, going to make sure you're 80% accurate. The best therapist I've ever worked with, a student, I've worked with over 50, and not only do I research them and research their gains and research the numbers, but there's also this qualitative aspect because I'm right next to them. So I know their personalities. I know how they are with these children. And this graduate student, out of I've researched over 50 at this point, she was the world's greatest introvert. So some people are like, well, good therapists are charismatic. I don't find that to be the case. I found that my most effective therapist was the biggest introvert I've ever met. And she was so shy and she would blush all the time. You ask her a question, she turns all red. And when I first met her, I thought, are you going to be able to grab the attention of these children that have attentional deficits, that have autism spectrum disorder? And what she did is she always followed the 80% rule. So I was just like, hey, can we take it up a level? I would say, hey, let's make it harder. Let's pull away some tools. She'd show me her data. She's like, we're at 80%. She got double the gains. We were all getting amazing gains after 5 sessions. We on average were getting 10 less errors after 5 sessions. She was getting 20 with her clients. And that's because she followed the 80% rule. It's like dieting. It's like when it comes to carbohydrates, if you really count your carbs and you're like, yeah, I'm going to go over those 20 grams in a 2-hour period. It's going to show. That's how treating speech sound disorders are in the 80% rule. It's been researched over multiple disciplines. It has a huge evidence base, but if you follow it strictly, you're going to be highly effective. And it's always moment to moment basis. So sometimes you might have to give all the prompts. Sometimes you give no prompts and the child's flying on their own. It's a dance. So the last objective we're looking at is now we're going to move down to a moderate level of prompting. And we got to get rid of the auditory. The sooner you can get rid of the auditory, the better. If I can get rid of the auditory by session 2, I am so happy. So how are we going to get rid of the auditory? This is the paragraph, the pre-treatment target paragraph. I tell parents, I want you to think about a daily routine: brushing teeth, bath time. Is it going to be sleeping, going to bed? And you're going to do this every single day. So we're going to tape it up on the wall. We're going to tape it on a nightstand. We're going to tape it next to the toothbrush. And part of that routine, one time every day, the child is going to read the paragraph. And I explained to the parent that because when the child memorizes this paragraph, we're able to focus on how the child is talking. The child's able to freeze the child up, where the child can focus on how the child's talking because this is memorized. And I'm able to stop talking. And when I stop talking, the child becomes the teacher. There's an internal locus of control. And I tell them, you're the teacher now. So if we're saying that word scrape, because the child practices one time every single day, that's enough. I've researched this in their daily routine. So I even tell parents, don't say before we go to the park because you're not going to go to the park every day. Some days it's going to be raining. You're not going to the park every day. It's one of those things you do every single day because consistency reaps results. I'm able to then say for the word scrape, you were the teacher now. You said it all by yourself. You remember the snake sound. You remember to keep it saying. So there's really that change of power in which the child realizes my efforts matter. I'm in control over whether or not I'm successful or not. This is everything. This is an internal locus of control, which is the golden apple to therapy. If I've accomplished that, I've done my job. You've done your job. So the first thing we want to do is stop talking. So as you can see, it's written, everything's there. We have moderate level with the paragraph, and we're still keeping an 80% level of accuracy. So things that are hard, I might, for instance, the child has the S. I might go to a maximum level of prompting here because the R is still difficult. It reminds me of when I watch figure skaters and they get to those really difficult moves where they need their partner's help, and then they get to those moves they can do on their own. That's kind of like what it's like going through the paragraph. The child knows, can, I, me, too. And then you get into these 3-element clusters. It's like, whoa, I need your help here, partner. All right, we are nearing the end. I'm so glad that you're here this morning with me. This is time so well spent. You're going to change a lot of lives in 2024. We're going to spend those $5 so well, and we're going to create great change in the process. So look at these clusters, and you see SKR at age 7 is the most difficult. What I encourage you to do, because of our research, this is hot off the press, I encourage you to choose R blends over L blends because R develops a year later than L, and the higher you aim, the higher the gains. So we just completed research and we compared SPR and SPL. Guess which one gave greater benefits for all of the sounds, but also greater gains in the L sound? I bet you know it was the SPR. So if you want to make improvements on L, don't work on L, work higher than L on SPR. So when you look at these clusters, I encourage you to go to the top. Now, some of you are thinking, I have a child that cannot produce the R when I give them every tool in the toolbox, Kelly. And I get you. Then we're going to shelf the R, and I encourage you to do SK, yeah, such as skew, or SK-WA, such as squash. I still want you to go for those 3-element clusters because we've done the research, and 3-element clusters get double the gains compared to 2. So go for squash, go for SKW, go for SK-YA before you go for the SW. Now, if you can't get those, SW is my go-to for children who are like, and SW is kind of the lowest goal that I ever start with. And that's where I go really long. Don't pass out. And then we go into the W and we go, ooh, 0 miles an hour. Okay. And I'll have them say something like, sweep it to me. So as you can see, we get rid of the auditory first. And as soon as possible, get rid of the auditory. Then we're going to get rid of the tactile, where the child's actually touching their face. If you do an approach like prompt, you're touching the child's face, obviously. Then we get rid of the temporal. The temporal is where we're moving to show the child how to produce the sound. So R is like this. And then we're going to visual. So it just like, and the child's like, why is she doing that? Oh, I know why. It's because that's R. And then we get to imagery where we'll just say, are you going to remember your angry dog teeth? Okay, let's do it. So that's how we go. Get rid of auditory first. In the traditional model, people were getting rid of auditory last. When you are giving the auditory, you are doing the child's push-ups for them. You are in the driver's seat. You're doing the word retrieval. You're doing the motor planning. You're doing the motor programming. You're doing the execution. And the child's simply along for the ride. You got to get rid of auditory first. This is very important. Okay. We are nearing the end. So I just want to show you here, this is another one that you need to explain to the team how language is going to develop. So I might be working on SKR, the 3-element cluster at the top of the stairs, what is the child going to develop first? Vowels and diphthongs. So those children are going to start saying, for instance, if they want a cow, they're going to say, ow. And you're going to hear the diphthongs. Then we're going to hear stopped consonants. So then after that, the child's going to say moo. Then after that, we're going to hear fricatives. So then you're going to start hearing the child, for instance, say zoo. And then after that, we're going to hear the words affricates. You're going to start hearing this child, for instance, say bridge. And then after that, we're going to have 2-element clusters. And you start hearing this child say the easy ones, such as tweet or swing. And then after that, we're going to get the 3-element clusters. What I'm going to say is that you're working at the top. We do not change the order in which children develop speech. The only population I found that totally breaks this rule are children with autism spectrum disorder, and that's a whole different presentation. They're fascinating. But generally speaking, the children with childhood apraxia of speech are following this as well. The children I work with in diverse populations, children with cognitive impairment, children with phonological processes, children with articulation impairment, they go through the same steps. And what's neat about it is, for instance, I'm working with a child with childhood apraxia of speech. She's saying the paragraph with me in speech, right? And she has severe childhood apraxia of speech. And guess what she does well now? Diphthongs. Why is that important? Because when we are at the conversational speech level, vowels is what gives you intelligibility. And because of her vowels, I can be like, oh, what did you get for Christmas? And she'll say, for instance, I got a howl, and I got a hoggy, and I got and so I understand what she's saying. She got a doll and a doggy and a hi-ho-honey, My Little Pony, because her diphthongs are all into place. Now, this is a girl that in the beginning of the year was Am I working? What am I working with her on? I'm working with her on scrape and spray and drop and angry at 0 miles an hour. And I'm getting great gains. She's also saying all the stop consonants now. Now, our next step is her saying fricatives. So in therapy, she's doing that. In therapy, she's doing it. She just needs to go up the steps. She's not going to get the stops until she's got the diphthongs. She's not going to get the fricatives until she's got the stops. She's following the innate rules in which speech develops. Okay, we're getting to the last slide. I love this so much, and thank you so much for spending your time with me. But you can see that this matters. Speech sound disorders is not just our tick. What we're talking about in these 45 minutes, this is about changing children's lives by being mean and lean and using that $5, giving these children a high five that's going to change their lives. So I'm so glad we're spending this time together. So just to summarize what we covered, when you write a goal, are you using complex consonant clusters? Are you going for the 3-element clusters with the minimal level of prompting? We don't expect them to be able to say it independently. We expect them to be able to do it with some visuals, some imagery, because when we create neuronal connections like this, you're getting 5 for the price of 1. When you're working on easy, you're getting 1 for the price of 1. That's poor use of limited time. Let's give them 5. Give them 5. So the most to least prompting hierarchy, I don't care what the child can do on their own. Who cares? I care about what the child can do when I empty out my toolbox with them. This is your secret sauce. Use it. Use it liberally right from the start, even in the assessment period. Using multimodal cueing and fading the auditory as soon as possible. Soon as you fade that auditory, the child's in charge of their learning, keeping an 80% accuracy level, of course. And select multifaceted goals. So our goal with the complex treatment target paragraph is not just about speech. Remember, this is about attention. This is about language. This is about literacy. This is about executive function. This is about motor skill development. Let's get 5 for the price of 1. You were going to change these lives this way by working smarter, not harder. So that is today the end of the presentation. If you have any questions, Leave it in the Facebook group, the Preschool SLP Kelly Vess SLP. So the Facebook group is the Preschool SLP Kelly Vess SLP. We have the slides there for you to use if you want to reference the slides. I also have a daily decision. So at the bottom, if you want to write an annual goal for speech sound disorders and 2 objectives to get there, just put that in the Facebook group and we can give you feedback as a community. I'll give you feedback, other members will give you feedback, and how we can up level these goals, or if this goal is like amazing, awesome sauce and we can learn from it, that would be great. But I want you to take all this learning right now and I want you to put it into action. So we need to act on this so that this becomes a skill that belongs to you and that you can hone over time. So thank you so much, and I will see you tomorrow. Tomorrow, we are going to cover language. And this is going to be such a game changer because we are going to look at narratives. And once again, you're not just working on language skills. When you're working on narratives, you are affecting the child's life socially, emotionally, academically, every aspect of the child's life beyond language expression and language comprehension. So I will see you tomorrow at 9 a.m. Make sure to bring your coffee and set your alarm clock. So take all of this information, roll up your sleeves, and make the world a better place. And you are always first.